Hey everybody, in this video we're going to be showing you how to paint an Imperial Roman Legionary, the absolute classic and quintessential Roman soldier that we all know very well from TV and movies, things like that, wearing the banded armour known as the Lorica segmentata and carrying the large rectangular shield with the elaborate painted design upon it. And the brand and model we're going to be using for our guide is from Victrix Limited, which is their multi-part plastic kit and one we definitely recommend. It's a very nice set. But no matter what type of miniature you're painting for your Romans, no matter what brand it is, this guide is still going to work for you because of course they're all going to have the same details on them. Now for the shield we're going to be using a decal from a company known as Little Big Men Studios, and it's a very unique style of decal that applies differently to most transfers that you're going to be used to. But in this video we're going to show you the entire process of applying it to your models, and as you're going to see, it looks great. So I really hope you like the video and we'll see you at the desk. When you're building your Roman legionaries, the little thing that you ought to think about is their shields as you're putting them together, because their tower shields are really large and obscure quite a lot of detail on the model. So a great thing to do is to keep them separate, and as you'll see, it means applying the transfer to the shield is much easier as well. So that's exactly what I've done with my Roman legionary. You can see here I've got the main body, the miniature, and the shield kept separate, and I've undercoated them using Zandri dust, and this was both the shield and the legionary himself. Now Zandri dust is a colour by Citadel and is a great starting point for all the paints that we're going to be using on this model, although you don't have to go for this colour if you don't want to. We are going to be covering all over it. So a mid-tone grey is also a great choice. Something like Mechanica Standard Grey from Citadel or Uniform Grey from the Army Painter. These are both great choices. Now for that shield, I've taken advantage of it being separate by spraying directly down at it using some matte white from the Army Painter. Now this is for a starting point for the transfer which we're going to be applying to it later on. For these Little Big Men Studios transfers, the facing way you're going to apply them does need to be white for the effect to work. So spraying it like this is just a great starting point for this. And as you can see, if you're painting a lot of these shields, it means you can do loads of them really quickly. However, you can paint it white by hand instead if you prefer, so the choice really is yours. However, for our legionary, to start out painting, what we're going to do is begin with all the silver details on it. And for this, the colour I'm going to be using is plate mail metal from the Army Painter. Now with this paint, what I'm going to do is apply it to my palette just down here like that. And then for the brush to apply it, I'm going to go for a sort of medium to large size brush. So a regiment brush from the Army Painter is perfect for it. And all we need to do is to thin it down with just a little touch of water like this. So it's nice and smooth on the palette, just testing it there to see how thin it is. A little bit too much water there, so I'm just going to add a tiny bit more of the paint into it like that. And there we go, that looks better. That's flowing nice and smoothly and is covering fairly well. So all we need to do with this is to paint it over all the details that we want to be silver, which in the case of our legionary just here is going to be all of his armour. So the body armour around here, going around his waist and over his shoulders and up to his neck just in there. Also, of course, we need to paint in the helmet like this. And if your miniature is holding a pilum like how mine is just here, then be sure to paint the whole iron head all the way down there like that. And also this sort of counterweight ball that we got just here, and the spike that's on the very base fit down there too. Now on the shield, don't forget to paint the shield boss as well, the really large part right in the middle of it. Be sure to base coat that with silver at this stage as well. Once you've finished base coating all of that silver, we're then ready to move on to the next colour, which is going to be just on the body of the legionary, and that's for his tunic. Now, there's quite a bit of debate as to what colour this would really be, so it's entirely up to you what colour you choose for it. But I think deep red is really good for this. And a quick pointer as well, if you happen to be painting a red shield as well, if you're going to be doing these two details the same sort of colour, be sure to pick a different tone for them both. So for the tunic, I'd recommend a darker red than what you use in the shield. Now the colour I've chosen is Dragon Red from the Army Painter, and I'm going to be applying this again using my regiment brush from the Army Painter as well. And this is a really nice colour, you see, a really lovely red. And all we've got to do is make sure we got it under control, because we need a little bit more control now than when we did when we were applying the silver details. Got to work around that now, you see. So let's make sure we got that nicely thinned down and loaded up, and then it's just a matter of picking out this layer of the fabric. So the area I'm talking about here is the tunic showing down here. So we're looking at painting all the way around here and up around the sleeves as well. You can see this is where you need to be careful just not to get it on top of that silver. Now when you get up to the neck, you can see there's a little bit of fabric there, but that's not actually the tunic, it's actually a little scarf they have underneath there. So don't worry about painting that for now, we'll come to that later on. And with that tunic now base coated, we're ready to move on to base coating some of the finer details on the miniature. And for this, we're going to be using 4 paints from Citadel. First of all, what we need is some Balthazar Gold to base coat all the bronze detail. And then we're going to move on to Doombull Brown, which is going to be for all the leather. After that, we'll need some Rhinox Hide, which will be for the haft of the pilum. And then finally, we need some Rakarth Flesh. And this is going to be for the scarf of the miniature and also the grip of the gladius too. But first of all, what we need is Balthazar Gold, and now we're going to be painting some smaller details, so I'm switching to a medium layer brush here from Citadel for a bit more control. As before, we just need to make sure the paint's thinned on the palette like this, but also I'm going to use the palette to get rid of the excess paint off the brush. So just twist it along like that to get rid of the paint that we don't need and bring the bristles to a nice point. And with this, first of all, what we need to do is to look on the body armour for any fine details on here. Little things like hinges and bolts, because all of these are bronze. So we're looking at areas such as that little hinge there, that little bolt there. We've got the fastening down the centre of the armour, so these ones that go all the way down there, not forgetting there's one just visible up there. And also, we have some little details to paint around the gladius too. So on the scabbard, you can see we've got all this raised detail around it. All this needs to be painted in with bronze. On the shield, make sure to paint around the outer rim of it as well, but really you can see it's all very fine details now, so you just need to take your time looking for them, including the belt. Now the thing to notice with the belt is actually it's all metal, so be sure to go all the way around the outside like that, and also down these parts across the middle just here as well. There we have all the bronze detail base coated, so now we can move on to the leather, for which we need some Doombull Brown. Now again, I'm using my medium layer brush for this, and the most obvious feature of this is going to be the sandals all the way down here. Not worrying about the skin for the time being, but there is some leather visible a bit further up. For example, on the gladius scabbard just here, there's actually leather in the middle of it, so we're looking at that kind of area there, just carefully painting around that bronze detail. And then there's a strap which goes up and around the body over the shoulder, so we're looking at this part that goes all the way along here. Now one very small bit of leather we need to pick out too is actually one of these straps on the armour. That is this one just up here. We're looking at this part just along there. With that done, we can now move on to Rhinox Hide. Now this is firstly for all the wooden details on the miniature, of which on the pillar we're looking at the haft of it and this part just along here, but also on the gladius it's the cross guard and also the pommel, and you can see it's just sheathed just along there. Now one other thing to do with this colour at this stage is for the tunic, if there's any underside of it that you can see, so for example just along there, just run a little bit of this colour just on that area like this just to darken it down. And finally, we need a small amount of Rakarth Flesh. Now, this is initially for the scarf, which you can see just appearing just here. The reason why this was worn is to stop the armour from cutting into their neck whilst they were moving around in it. So you can see it's just a very small detail just appearing there like that. But also, we've got the grips of the weapons. So for the gladius just here, painting the hand grip there, and the same for the dagger on this side. And with all those base coats now applied, we can move on to the next step of the miniature, which is to wash it to give some definition to all that detail that we have there. Now for this, if you want to, you can go for a dark brown for a slightly more worn, campaigned look, but I want to go for a cleaner, newer look. So we're going to be using a black wash here. I'm going for dark tone from the Army Painter, although Norn Oil is a great alternative if you wanted to use Citadel. And with this to apply it, what you need to do is to get a good largish sized brush. I'm using a monster brush here from the Army Painter, which is really good for this kind of thing. And all you need to do is just load up plenty on your brush like this, and then just start applying it all over the model, just letting it run into all the recessed detail. So just put it on there like that, just making sure it soaks in all across it like that. Now when you're applying this, it is possible for quite a large amount to collect towards the bottom of the miniature, which in such cases will start to appear areas like that. And if you spot that happening, just move away the excess like that so it's a little bit thinner. You just want those darker lines appearing in the recessed detail like that. And this will take around about 45 minutes to dry, and at the same time don't forget to also apply some of this wash onto the shield as well. For the shield you just need to go around the trim, the boss, and all across the back of it as well. The wash is now completely dry, and you can see on the shield I've done the boss and the rim, and also on the back of it, that's all been washed as well. And with that done, we can now move on to the next phase, which is to paint the Legionary skin. Now for this, we need 4 paints from Citadel. We're going to start out with a base coat of Bugman's Glow, then wash all over the skin using Reikland Flesh shade. Once that's dry, we'll then apply a layer of Cadian Fleshtone and then highlight it using Kislev Flesh. But first of all, we need that base coat of Bugman's Glow, and to apply this, I'm going to go for a medium layer brush from Citadel, which is a really nice size for the kind of area that we're covering here. And what we need to do is to make sure it's nicely thinned on the palette and under control, because some of this can be a little bit tricky to get to. So just check it on the palette. There we go. See, it's flowing easily from the brush, and I've not got too much on there. Nice point on the brush. With that, we can now start base coating in this skin. So to begin with, we've got the face, of which you can see a lot of it's concealed because of the cheek guard. So you just need to make sure you paint in the skin in the middle. Just kind of poking the brush in there like that to access all that detail. And then we also have the other areas of flesh, such as the legs and the toes, poking out just down there. So all we need to do is paint across there. But for all these other areas, such as the legs and the arms, just be as neat as you can whenever you get close to the areas that we've base coated and washed so far. Once the base coat is dry, you're then ready to apply a coat of Reikland Flesh shade all over the skin, and for this I recommend sticking to that medium layer brush for a bit of control, especially in areas such as around the face, just here. Once the wash is dry, we're then ready to move on to a layer of Cadian Fleshtone. Now on these miniatures there's quite a lot of area that's large open muscle, such as on the legs just here. So for parts like this, what I do is go into it intending to apply it as two thin coats. And you can see I've got a fairly thin down version of the paint here, with a little bit of water you see, so it's nice and translucent as I paint it on like this. And what I'm looking for is those deeper recesses, the really deep ones, and avoiding those. And that'll be areas such as just on the side of the kneecap, right there, you see, where it's a little bit darker. And for the shallower ones, such as on the front of the leg, where you've got the front just there, I'm not so concerned about that. Now what I do is apply a single coat on like that, and then just give it a few moments to dry. And whilst that's drying, we'll just do the face. And on the areas such as faces, where it's smaller like this and filled with lots of texture, all you do is pick out the raised areas. So we're looking at things such as the nose just there. Then we've got the upper and lower lip, so just very delicately doing things like that. And you see that just brings out the expression. Same as the cheekbone just there. There's really not much to see though, because of course the helmet covers a lot of it. Now I can return to the leg, you can see it's dried, and as I apply a second coat, thin down the exact same way, this time I'm going to be aiming the colour just on those raised areas and the smoother crest of the muscles. So you can see on the leg just there, at the top, and the kneecap following it down. And this time on the front of the leg, what I do is apply that second coat down the very centre, like that. Then skip that shallow recess we had at the side and then pick out the muscle just there on the calf. And you can see this way I get a very subtle smooth highlight that just starts to bring out the texture and shape of the muscle. And then finally we're ready to add a fine highlight of Kislev Flesh onto the skin. And for this I recommend switching to a smaller brush. I'm using a small airbrush from Citadel just here, and all I'm looking for is areas where the light is catching on raised details. So you can see just things like the top of the kneecap just there, and the front of the leg, which is going to go just like there. We've also got to do the toes, so just dotting it along there like that. When we get to the curved areas of muscle, such as on the legs, all I'm going to do is just look at the top of the crest of it, of that curve, and just follow along there like that, just to help accentuate where the light is catching. And with that, the skin is now complete, and we can move on to the next phase of painting the miniature, which is to do a little bit of layering. Now for this, we're going to be returning to Dragon Red first of all for that tunic and reapplying it, only this time a little bit more in a controlled fashion. So we just need to get a small amount once again onto our palette, there like that. And this time as I'm applying it, I'm actually going to use my medium layer brush, because now rather than painting the entirety of the tunic, what I want to do is to focus this just on the raised areas and avoid the recesses where that wash settled. So for example, if we take a look at it around here, you can see all the creases we've got on the back. What I'm going to do is start applying it to these flat areas like this, and when I get to those recesses, just skip past them so it stays darker and then carry on the other side. And what this is going to do is just brighten up this area and smooth it out a little bit as well and give it a neater finish. And there we are, the red is now much brighter, and we can move on to doing a little bit more layering on two other colours. First of all, we need to return to plate mail metal for the silver armour, and then we're going to go to matte white from the army painter. And this is going to be for the shield to get it ready for the transfer. But first of all, we need plate mail metal, and for this, what we want to do is to apply this onto that silver armour. And what it's going to do is give a really nice shiny finish to it, and also make it a little bit neater as well, and getting rid of any blotches that we might have from the wash earlier on. So to apply it, I'm still going to use that medium layer brush, and we just need to get a small amount of this, you see, nicely thinned down. And what I'm going to do is start applying it to the flat of the armour panels, but avoiding the recessed details. So take a look at this part on the shoulder just here. What I'm going to do is apply it to this area like that, avoiding those little brass parts that we've got like that. And you can see it just makes a really nice shine appear on that area. It's just a matter of taking your time going around all the silver armour doing this. There we are, I've finished the layer of the silver, and you can see it's nice and shiny now, and I've done it on the boss of the shield as well. And in fact, with that done, we can now move on to the next colour, which is going to be matte white from the army painter, and that is for the flat of the shield here, because you can see some of that wash that we used early on has stained some of the flat areas. So what we need to do is just to neaten that up. And it's very simple. All we need to do using matte white is just apply it to the flat of the shield up to areas like this, just leaving that shade still in the very deep recess where it meets the rim, and the same in the boss like that. But you can see it just helps even out the facing of it and prepares it for the next step. And And there we are, the shield face is now painted white, and with that done, we're ready to move on to the really exciting part, which is to apply the transfer to the shield. Now for this, we're going to be using transfers from Little Big Men Studios, and these kind of transfers are a little bit different to what you might be used to. They come on sheets like this, and you can see we've got 12 of them there, including a smaller shield as well, and we've also got a part to put on the banner as well, and they're designed to fit with certain kits, which you can see written down here, designed for the kit that we've got. And there are different sizes for different brands of Roman Legionary, so whichever one you're doing, just make sure you got the right one for it. And also remember earlier on we talked about having a red tunic. We just made sure the red is a slightly different shade to what we've got here to help two details stand out from each other. But to use these transfers, the first step is to cut one of them out. So with this you can use scissors or you can use a sharp knife. That's what I'm going to go for this. And what we're going to do is use a steel ruler here just to pick one of them and cut it out. So it's just a matter of selecting the one that you want, slicing around the edges, and then cutting out that central square as well for the shield boss to fit through. I've cut out the transfer, and at this stage it's a good idea just to quickly test fit it against the shield. So you can see the boss has been cut through there, a hole for it in the centre. It fits nice and snugly, it's exactly what we want. Now the next thing we want to do is just to crease the transfer ever so slightly, so don't fold it. What I mean is that we just want to bend it a little bit like this, towards the shape of the shield. And this will just help it adhere a little bit better like that. And it's actually this side that's actually going to be facing the shield. This is the outside, so we want this facing outwards. So you can see it's actually going to go onto the actual plastic shield like that. Okay, so with that in mind, we can now move on to the next step, which is to remove the plastic film that we've got on this side. So all you need to do is just find a part where you can lip it off like that, and then just remove it, and there we go. We've now got a sticky surface here, so you mustn't touch that anymore. Instead, just carefully handle it by the edges like this, turn it round, then grab hold of your shield, and just take your time just positioning it around that boss there, using that for guidance in the center. So we want it kind of like that. Then just gently press it down through the middle like that, and then fold it down on either side until it's stuck flat onto the shield. There we go, like that. So now the next step is to, well, just get hold of a good largish brush. I'm using a monster brush here from the Army Painter, load it with some water, and just paint the paper like this, just all the way across, give it a good soaking. And then you just got to wait for a few moments, and this is actually the part that I really like. This bit's really exciting because you're about to see the transfer appear in all its glory on the shield just there. So with that done like that, just test it, wait for it to start moving. There we go. And then all we've got to do is remove the paper. That could be a little bit fiddly, but there we go. Easy as that, we've got a beautiful design on the shield. So at this stage, you can see, if you look around the edges, you might see a little bit of the white showing through. In fact, there's just a little bit running down there. Now, all you need to do is get a bright red, something like pure red from the Army Painter, and just gently paint over that to help hide that in. Likewise, if you find the transfer goes right into the corner around the boss, you might just need to run a little bit of the wash into the very deepest corner like that, just to help separate the two details. But really all that needs to happen once you've done that is to paint over the surface of this with a matte varnish, and then, well, your shield is ready to be glued onto your Legionary. And there we are, the transfer's been applied and the shield's been glued onto the Legionary, and well, it looks fantastic. And if you wanted to, you could leave your miniature here and just move on to basing it. However, what we're going to do now is add some highlights to the model to really finish it off. And to begin with, what we want to do is to highlight that red tunic, for which I'm going to be using pure red for the Army Painter, which is convenient because it's also the red we used on the shield. Now for this, all we need to do is to get a small amount of this ready, and we're just going to use it to pick out the raised details on that tunic. So you don't need very much of it. So for that reason, pick a smaller brush. I'm going to use a small layer brush from Citadel here, and all we need to do is get a small amount of this thinned down and ready like that. There we go. And using this colour, we just want to pick out the tops of the creases on the fabric on the tunic. So you can see we've got the creases on the back of it just here. What I'm going to do is just paint some lines following on the tops of these areas. So just there like that, and following down there. And there we go, just to emphasise them a little bit more. Now I also want to do the hem of the tunic, for which it stands out quite a bit. So I can actually use the side of my brush just to skim along there like that. You can see I'm just very lightly applying it, and that way I get a nice neat straight line very quickly and easily. We want to do the exact same thing on the sleeves where we can see the red as well, so just along here. And with that, the tunic is complete, and now I can move on to highlighting the remaining details on the miniature. And for this, first of all, we need a paint from the Army Painter called Shining Silver to highlight all that silver armour, and then we're going to move on to some paints from Citadel. First of all, for this, we need Sycorax Bronze to highlight the bronze details, and then after that, we're going to use some Skrag Brown to highlight all the leather. After that, we need some Pallid Wych Flesh for the scarf, and then finally some Doombull Brown to highlight the pilum. But first of all, we need some shining silver, and for this we just need a small amount of it, because all we're looking to do is to pick out the edges on that silver plate armour on the body and on the helmet and those kind of areas. So for this, go back to your small airbrush from Citadel, and using this, all we've got to do is get a small amount ready. There we go. And then we're just looking for those edges on all of that armour. So for example, on the body armour, what I'm going to be looking to do is to use the side of my brush close to the tip just to go along all the edges of the plates. So for example, along there like that. Then I'm going to twist the model so my hand remains nice and comfortable at this angle, and then just start following along edges like along there, and turning it all the way around so I can access the other side there like that. So you see, I'm always going to be moving the model to be able to be comfortable as I'm getting close to those edges. Next up, using Sycorax Bronze, we're ready to highlight all the bronze details, and it's just a matter of just picking them out on the sharpest edges that stand out the most. For example, just like this on these little bits of brass that we've got on the armour, and then of course the trim of the shield, for which we just need to go around the outside edge like this. Next, we're ready to highlight all the leather using Skrag Brown, and once again we just need to look for all the sharper edges, such as this one going along the edge of this strap all the way across the body, and of course on the sandals, for which we want the raised texture, such as this little part that we have down the centre, just little dots like that, and of course the lacing on the sides. Next, we're ready to add a very small amount of Pallid Wych flesh, and this is to highlight the scarf, for which we just need to pick out the raised texture just around there. And also, if you want to, you can also just pick out the raised detail on the grip of the gladius, these little raised parts of the ridges that we've got going along there. And finally, we're ready to highlight the wooden details using a small amount of Doombull Brown. And in the case of the pilum, it's just these edges that we've got around this part of it along there. And if you can see the gladius, just do a quick highlight on the crossguard and pommel as well. Now, once done this, your legionary is ready to be based. And as always, it's entirely up to you how you base your miniature. But for this one, I'm going to go for a grassland space to represent a battlefield somewhere in Britannia. And with the base now completed, this Roman legionary is finished and ready to travel to the frontiers of the Empire to fight against the barbarian hordes. So as you've seen, painting a Roman legionary is actually very straightforward, but the key feature of them is of course that shield and making sure you apply the transfer correctly. So make sure that the facing of the shield is completely white before you put the decal on, and also just make sure you follow the steps through as we've shown, and this way you'll get a really nice result with it. It's always a good idea as well to apply the transfer partway through painting the miniature, because then as you use the highlights you can use them to really embed that design into the rest of the miniature. Anyway, that's the most important thing to remember, so we really hope you enjoyed this video. Have fun painting your Romans, and we'll see you all again very soon.